People in the waiting room, so I'll let you know once we hit 18 to go ahead and start, Justin.
Okay.
Alrighty, all of our friends from the waiting room have made it in if you want to get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Becca. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the fourth annual Delaware County Sustainability Conference hosted by the Delaware County Office of Sustainability. My name's Justin Tibbles. I serve as Special Assistant to Mayor Roots in the city of Chester. And while I work in municipal government, my undergraduate degree was in molecular and cellular biology, and I'm happy to put that to use as a new board member of the Delaware County Sustainability Commission. I'll be serving as the host of today's session, providing important information to ensure that your experience both in today's session and throughout the rest of the week leaves you feeling informed and inspired. First, with some housekeeping items. This session will take place in a Zoom webinar format, meaning that participants will be off camera throughout the duration of the presentation. Questions are encouraged and will be addressed following the presentation. So to ask a question, you may either type in the Q&A box found at the bottom of your screen or click the raise a hand button if you would like to ask your question out loud. Questions will be answered in the order in which they were received, or if we're seeing multiple questions of a similar nature, we'll bump those to the front. We'll do our best to ensure that all questions have been answered. However, we will be ending the session at the top of the hour. Now, to kick off our session, we are very excited to welcome Dr. Lloyd D. Baston, who will share his presentation, Lessening the Burden, How PA House Bill 109 Seeks to Tackle Cumulative Impacts of Pollution in Environmental Justice Communities. Dr. Baston is also joined by Alice Liu, policy analyst from the Clean Air Council, and Laura Snyder, environmental community advocate for the Marcus Hook Neighbors for Public Health. House Bill 109 is of particular concern to me as a public servant in and resident of the city of Chester, an environmental justice community where some of Delaware County's most disadvantaged residents endure high cumulative pollution levels and suffer some of Pennsylvania's highest health disparities as a result. Just a few months ago, I joined Mayor Roots, City Health Commissioner Dr. Kristen Motley, environmental justice advocate Zuline Mayfield, and others at a House Bill 109 hearing at Widener University to urge our state legislators to advance this bill. So I'm eager to have Dr. Lloyd Baston and his associates shed more light on the importance of PA House Bill 109 today. Before we jump in, I want to share a little about Dr. Baston. So Dr. Lloyd Baston is currently a professor of chemistry and biochemistry, associate dean of science, and coordinator of undergraduate research at Widener University, where he's taught organic chemistry, biochemistry, and sustainability since 2004. His current area of research is the development of greener methods for synthesizing pharmaceuticals and the development of new laboratory experiments for the undergraduate chemistry curriculum. Since 2000, he's been interested in the development of green chemistry and sustainability materials for the undergraduate chemistry curricula. He has several peer-reviewed articles and book chapters discussing the incorporation of sustainability, environmental justice, political advocacy, and green chemistry into the curriculum. He has co-edited the book Integration of Green and Sustainability Chemistry Principles into Education, and two special issues on advances in green chemistry education in Green Chemistry Letters and Reviews. Welcome, Dr. Baston, and again, welcome to Alice Liu and Laura Snyder. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Justin. I hope everybody can see my presentation, hopefully.
Lloyd, we see you in presentation or presenter mode, so we would be able to see where notes are.
Yes, okay, thank you. Can I fix that? That's the question. I'm going to just try to share again. Now my presentation's going crazy. Yeah, it's interesting. I have lost all graphics in my presentation as well. I'm just going to try to save my presentation again on, hold on.
Yeah, take your time.
Uh, Yeah, that's not good.
Technology always betrays us
Yeah,
right
isn't
when
it?
we don't want it to.
Yeah, and we tried this before. Okay, I think I have my presentation back with images and everything, so that's good. So let me try to share again and see if that works. Uh, is that better?
Yes, you're good to go.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this session. I'm very excited to be joined by Alice, Lou, and Laura Snyder to give their perspectives on House Bill 109 and the importance of bills that tackle cumulative impacts and think about cumulative impacts. To give you some sense of where I'm coming from, I am a chemist, as Justin said. And so I think about this through the lens of chemistry. And I got introduced to House Bill 109 this past year when my class started researching House Bill 109 and looked into House Bill 109 and sort of what we thought about it from the eyes of a scientist. And then we also traveled to Harrisburg and talked to our state representatives about supporting House Bill 109. We were also at the town hall that was held here on campus as well about House Bill 109. And I want to take a step back before Alice and Laura talk about cumulative impacts and House Bill 109, and just think about where pollution comes from, why we need bills like House Bill 109, and other things that we can think about as well to help address the disproportionate effects of pollution on environmental justice communities. So as a chemist, I think of these issues, the pollution, as a direct consequence of our chemical manufacturing process. And I want to dive into that a little bit, but chemistry is at the heart of every single product that we use every single day, whether those are our cosmetics and personal care products, our food and beverages, our paints, our coatings, our electronics, the different parts of our automobile and the fuels that we use to power those automobiles, construction and building materials, and then the things that I think people think of chemistry the most for: agriculture, animal feeding, pharmaceuticals, and biotech. But chemistry touches every part of all of these industries and really is at the heart of what's causing many of the issues that we are talking about. And if we think about the product from a life cycle perspective, there are many places where this life cycle and the chemistry associated with each of these parts of the life cycle affects communities of color. Whether that's extraction of raw materials, whether that's the manufacturing process, the packaging process, the distribution and use, a little bit less so, but then come back to the disposal that again has effects on our communities. And I want to sort of dive into several of these and urge you to think about the inputs and the outputs that go into each step of the process. And as a chemist, of course, I'm thinking about the chemicals and the chemical processes. These are usually the inputs that go into each of these parts of the life cycle. And then the things that come out to a chemist, these are waste. To a community, this is the pollution that is causing so many health effects. So if we think about obtaining raw materials, currently almost all of our chemicals are derived from crude oil. And we extract that crude oil from the planet. If that material doesn't come from crude oil, it most likely comes from some sort of metal alloy, in the earth, which we also extract from the earth. So all of these materials are being extracted from our from the earth, and they are also disproportionately located in communities of color around the globe. We're also, as most of us know, using these resources much faster than they can be replenished naturally. Once we have those raw materials, we have to transform those raw materials into our products. And that's a multiple step process. We have oil refineries that are refining that oil into the fine chemicals that are used to manufacture most of the products. Most of that manufacturing is largely responsible for a lot of the hazards that are in our environmental justice communities. If you think about Cancer Alley in Louisiana, they are making many of these key building blocks to chemicals are made along the Mississippi River. Once we have those raw chemicals, those sort of key chemicals that we use in our manufacturing process, we have to transport those to another facility and then turn those chemicals into the product that we're looking for, whether those are plastic bottles, whether those are pharmaceuticals, or any of those other products that I mentioned on the opening slide. This is where much of our pollution comes from, that chemical manufacturing process, the refining process, and what goes in and out of those are the pollutions that are harming our environments. And most of these facilities are disproportionately located in and near communities of color. All of that also requires energy. We are using unsustainable energy sources, and we continue to increase our reliance on fossil fuels, natural gas, petroleum, and those have many of these problems as well. We are generating tons of CO2, but these are also polluting energy sources as well. And again, many of these energy generating facilities are disproportionately located in communities of color. Once we have the product to the consumer and we use the product, then we have a disposal issue. How do we dispose of all of these materials that we no longer need? We have, for many years, thought that recycling might be the problem, or the solution, but we recycle at very low rates. So we recycle plastic bottles at about a 30% rate. We recycle electronic devices much lower a percentage, about 15%. So and this is largely because of economic issues. This is not economically a viable process of recycling. It requires a ton of energy, which takes us back to the energy use. And so this does not seem to be a viable solution to dealing with this waste. And so most of our disposal, most of our waste goes into landfills or is incinerated. And these facilities, again, disproportionately located in communities of color. And so this is not really a new idea, unfortunately. There are many examples of these industries disproportionately affecting communities of color. Very well-known book by Dr. Robert Bullard explored how all of Houston's garbage dumps were located in and around African-American neighborhoods, while blacks only made up about a quarter of the city's population. I mentioned Cancer Alley earlier. Very well-known example in the chemistry community of where parishes and communities along the Mississippi River have a much higher rate or risk of cancer from toxic air pollutants than anywhere else in the country. Also, well-known cases west and south side Chicago, where Hazel Johnson started a community organization to push back against all of the mainly disposal companies, incinerators, and other facilities dealing with disposal, pushed back because almost all of those facilities for Chicago were located in the west and south side of Chicago. And there are other examples, many other examples around the country and around the world that are dealing with these sorts of issues. I wanted to bring this to Pennsylvania. And so if you look at the Penn Enviro screen of the state of Pennsylvania, this is a snapshot of undue environmental burden on vulnerable communities. And if you look at the darker the blue, the more burden those communities are overtaking. So this is not just a Delaware County problem. This is a problem across many, many of our communities across the state of Pennsylvania. Since we are at the Delaware County Sustainability Conference, I wanted to zoom in that map onto the county of Delaware. And if you look here, this is the map zoomed in to Delaware County. And we have a lot of communities burdened with undue burden in the county of Delaware County as well. And as Justin mentioned, Chester along the riverfront is one of the more affected communities in our county, in our state, and in the country. And so this is a problem that I think we all need to be thinking about. This is, if you zoom in a little bit closer, I just wanted to show Chester is about 5 square miles of land and has an enormous number of manufacturing and waste disposal facilities along the riverfront. There's Kimberly-Clark, there's Evonik, there's PQ Corporation, there's Covanta, the incinerator, there's the Delcora water treatment plant, all of these located along the waterfront and in communities of color. And so I want to have us think about how we got here. And I'm just going to go through, sorry. We got here for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is historical zoning practices. So redlining and zoning pushed people living in low-income communities into less environmentally protected areas. We also have incentivized economics over health and environmental concerns. This is both at the chemical industry and at the government level. We have people worried about labor and jobs and that over environmental and health concerns of the communities. The existing infrastructure also adds to this issue. It's easier to obtain these permits in already existing industrial zones. So once a zone gets zoned as industrial, that makes it easier to then get additional permits into that zone. And then our regulatory system. So our current regulatory system, I think of environmental and health risk as a function of the hazard of the chemical and the exposure. And that's how our regulatory systems think about it as well. And so we currently regulate exposure. And we minimize that risk by reducing our exposure. But we rely on state and we rely on state and federal environmental regulations to police that risk and reduce that exposure. And we have a system where we limit emissions of pollutants, but we do that by facility. We do not look at this cumulative impact of multiple industries in one community. And that really, to me, is one of the main ways that we got to the system where we're at right now. And so I want to next think about what we can do. And so we can reduce the waste going into landfills and being burned in incinerators. And that's something that we can each do as individual citizens. We can compost, we can reuse, we can reduce, we can recycle. As a chemist, I can work on changing our chemical manufacturing process. I can provide as best I can the next generation of scientists with the tools to change our chemical processes and how we make all of these products. We can advocate for policy changes at the state and national level, policy changes that encourage greener technology and green innovation, but also policy changes that lead to looking at cumulative impacts and changing the way we provide permits and looking at those processes differently. And that's what we want to spend the rest of the presentation talking about. I want to just tell you a little bit about green chemistry, because I think green chemistry provides us with a lot of the tools to address this on the chemistry side, on the manufacturing side. And so green chemistry thinks about that environmental and health risk a little bit differently. Rather than reducing exposure, which, as I said, is how we have traditionally minimized our risk, to the chemist, that's through safety protocols, wearing safety gear, all of those sorts of things. And for the communities, that is through the environmental regulations that I mentioned earlier. Green chemistry thinks about this a little bit differently and wants to eliminate or reduce the hazard. And so if we eliminate or reduce the hazard by using less hazardous chemicals, generating less waste, we don't have to worry about the exposure as much as we currently have to. And this idea of changing the thought process of how we do chemistry was formulated by Paul Anastas and John Warner about 27 years ago, and they put together guidelines that chemists now use to allow us to think about, reframe how we think about alternative processes and alternative manufacturing processes. These are called the 12 principles of green chemistry. I'm not going to go through those. If you boil them down, they come down to being more efficient, using less hazardous chemicals, using less energy, and designing for biodegradation. And if we think about how this applies to the chemical manufacturing industry, this is if we incorporate our thought process, if we look when we're looking at alternatives to a process, if we think about and apply those 12 principles of green chemistry to each part of the life cycle, we can address many of the pollution concerns that we have. We can develop new processes and products that start from materials that come from renewable sources. So reducing that extraction of raw materials. So using materials that come from plants or come from bio waste. There are lots of people doing research on how we can extract these basic chemicals from places other than crude oil. We can develop processes that generate less hazardous waste and less hazardous chemicals. This directly reduces pollution from manufacturing and reduces hazards of the manufacturing process. And that's the biggest area where the concerns to communities come from, is the pollution and the use of hazardous substances in the manufacturing process. If we develop biodegradable products that don't accumulate in nature, this is going to reduce our pollution from disposal. It's going to put less waste in landfills and incinerators. And we might even be able to reuse many of those products many of those materials that the products biodegrade into. We also need to develop processes that reuse and recycle materials. There's a lot of talk now about a circular economy, which essentially means that somebody's waste is somebody else's natural resource. So that would require us to extract less natural resources from the planet. It would also reduce the pollution from disposal if we can start reusing more of these materials. Reuse is much more efficient than recycle. And so there are a number of companies that are thinking about a green chemistry and incorporating green chemistry into their processes. I picked out a couple that came out of John Warner. who started the Warner Babcock Institute for Green Chemistry, which during COVID transitioned to what's now called the Technology Greenhouse. And they have developed a number of technologies that utilize the principles of green chemistry to address environmental concerns and many of our environmental problems. They early on developed a process that recycled ocean plastics. So if you this is a picture of the technology. It's essentially a 3D printer that breaks down those ocean plastics, and then they use this 3D printer to print little pellets. And if you have ever bought Adidas or Nike shoes where they used recycled materials, it was made using the process developed by the Warner Babcock Institute. They also have a number of other companies that John Warner has started up that look for medicinal pharmaceuticals through green chemistry and a number of other products that I'm not going to go into here, but you can look up the Technology Greenhouse and find a number of technologies that they have applied the principles of green chemistry to and improved the manufacturing process. And so and then the second big thing that we can start thinking about, so green chemistry, I think, is one way to address our concerns and reduce the environmental burden on environmental justice communities. But looking at pollution in a different way and regulating that in a different way is the second way, and I'm going to turn it over to Alice to talk about cumulative impacts.
Thank you, Lloyd, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Alice Liu. I'm the policy analyst at Clean Air Council. And so I'll just be giving a brief overview of what House Bill 109 would do, as well as, talk broadly about cumulative impacts, because that's what we're here to discuss. So next slide, please. Yes, and first, just a brief overview of who Clean Air Council is, what we do. We're an environmental organization with members across the state, Pennsylvania, and we also work within the region. And our main mission is to really protect everyone's right to a healthy environment. Next slide. So, probably wondering, what are cumulative impacts? To sum it up, cumulative impacts really kind of highlight what a lot of us already know to be true. If you imagine, and some of you don't even have to imagine, if there is a landfill in your backyard, and suddenly a new polluting power plant wants to come into your community as well, you wouldn't think to consider these two sources of pollutants separately. You would, of course, logically want to think about how they build on each other and how pollutants from both facilities will build on each other to worsen that overall impact on you and your family. And so to that extent, cumulative impacts really try to capture how multiple sources of pollution can build on each other and also be compounded by other stressors. So these stressors can include things like environmental stressors. This could be the existing air pollution or the water pollution, social stressors like racism, redlining, and then health stressors, things like chronic disease. You can imagine how all of these will change how certain environmental contaminants and pollutants impact different people based on, how they are situated. Next slide. So as Lloyd has already mentioned, we're very much, the way we consider impacts is like on a case by case basis, on a facility by facility basis. And so in Pennsylvania, our any permits that are proposed are definitely reviewed. Their environmental impacts are reviewed kind of like project by project. However, the cumulative impacts movement, I'd say, is growing across the country. So here are just a list of, I believe, 10 states currently with cumulative impact laws in place. There are more with proposed bills already in the legislature. And so we're really hoping to add Pennsylvania to this list at some point and continue growing this list. So next slide. And that brings us to House Bill 109. This bill was introduced by Representative Greg Vitale, and it would, at the most basic level, require any applicants for permits to either build a new facility or expand an existing facility within an environmental justice area to submit a cumulative impact report as part of their permit application. So this cumulative impact report would include details on how the project would impact the environment. It would also require an assessment of the cumulative impacts of what that project kind of will bring to the community. And then it would also need to highlight any unavoidable impacts. So these are impacts that a developer and an applicant just wouldn't be able to control or mitigate, and would be kind of forced upon the community. The bill also describes and defines an environmental justice area as an area with increased pollution burden, and a vulnerable population. And the way it thinks about vulnerable populations is through assessing the demographic, economic, health, and environmental data of the community. And this is pretty new because it kind of deviates from a traditional view of an environmental justice area that only looks at something like income, for example. This is definitely a much more holistic way of defining a community. The bill would require public participation opportunities to take place if they aren't already planned. And it would require any of the testimony received during these public hearings, as well as any recommendations from the impacted municipality to be considered as part of DEP's permit review. DEP stands for the Department of Environmental Protection, and they are the entity that is responsible for reviewing permits, and in this case, granting permits. And then finally, the DEP would be allowed to deny permits based on their cumulative impacts. And this is one of the key pieces here, because not only are cumulative impacts now being considered, DEP has the authority to deny a permit if they find that cumulative impacts are too profound. I should say, though, the bill does not require DEP to deny a permit based on cumulative impacts, but it does, allow them to do so. Next slide. Oh, and before I pass it off to Laura, sorry, I'll just say that House Bill 109 has been introduced in the House. It's passed through the Environmental Committee, and it is now awaiting further action on the House floor. So I'm happy to follow up with anyone here today about how best to get involved, but we're kind of at a point where any support, and especially interest from the broader public, is much appreciated. So thank you. I will pass it on to Laura.
All right. Thank you, Alice, and thank you, Lloyd. I'm Laura Snyder. I am Delaware County resident, been an occupational therapist for 35 years in the county, serving the county, and became involved in this advocacy work with the Mariner East Pipeline, documenting and watchdogging the many, many violations over 7 years with that. And then wanted to continue my work. So started with the Marcus Hook Area Neighbors for Public Health, and started working on cumulative impacts. So I became involved in a study with the Marcus Hook Area Neighbors for Public Health, Johns Hopkins, and Clean Air Council. So this study was done from 2022 to 2024, and it looked at cumulative impacts, something that hasn't been done yet in a study. And I thought it was important to, at least address this today and how it relates to HB 109. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because we had presentations on it, but I just felt it was important to highlight, components of it today. Okay, next slide. So we had the study, and the participants lived primarily in Trainer, Marcus Hook, and Chester. And looking at the map that Lloyd had showed earlier of the environmental justice areas along the waterfront, this was the area that was studied in our survey. And we had 147 surveys. Average age was 45. Average years of residency, 30 years. 78 identified as female, 62% non-Hispanic white, 27% non-Hispanic Black, 9% Hispanic, and 52% had one or more children under the age of 18 living in the household. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the survey looked at the cumulative burdens that exist in this region of Delaware County. What made the survey different is we had co-investigators involved, was people who actually lived in the area, who participated for the 2 years, ongoing in the research. And the study looked at physical, mental, and environmental health. As Lloyd had talked about earlier, we have multiple co-located polluting facilities in this environmental justice area of Delaware County. We have the largest trash to steam plant in the nation. This trash is shipped here from all across, neighboring states, New York, everywhere, and is burned here in Delaware County. We also have, next to Chester, the largest petrochemical plants. We have Marcus Hook. We have the Mariner East system there. We have Monroe Energy. So we have lots and lots of industry together. So we have, that creates multiple burdens and community stressors. In addition to the chemical stressors in the area, residents also face a myriad of non-chemical stressors, from financial insecurity, food insecurity, violence, and crime. So all of these stressors together create cumulative burdens. Okay, next slide. All right, in the study, this graphic here depicts what the subjects were most concerned about. And in the center, you can see it was pollution, chemical exposures, and violence and crime were the largest percentage. And then we had financial resources, housing insecurity, wages and all that also affecting. Okay, next slide. So the key findings of our cumulative impact assessed study was that residents of Southern Delaware County are overburdened by a combination of both chemical and non-chemical stressors. These cumulative burdens harm physical, mental, and environmental health in a myriad of ways. Symptoms of physical and mental health problems are far more widespread in the community than what we had thought. Residents are making a clear connection between their health impacts, pollution, odors, noise in their environment. Children in Delaware County are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of pollution. As we know, in Chester alone, the asthma rate is 5 times the national standard. What really struck me so impactful was 95% of the survey participants reported noxious odors interfered with their daily activities and their daily life. And as we can see, with now we have the Canadian wildfire smoke impacting us again last week and into this week. And then you add that with all of these other cumulative burdens. So this is what our Q findings had found. Next slide. So the recommendations from our study for local regulation and policymakers were to enact environmental justice legislation to address cumulative burdens in permitting approval process. It must consider existing pollution sources as well as community level environmental and public health data. It must require permit application to demonstrate how proposals for new and expanding infrastructure will mitigate and not exacerbate existing environmental and public health stressors. It must prioritize community engagement, inclusion, and transparency. and must broaden consideration of community health and safety to be inclusive of all the community concerns. So essentially, HB 109 would take all these recommendations into effect. Okay, next slide. Great, and I think that concludes our presentation, and we would love to answer any questions you have about HB 109 or any other questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bastin, Alice, and Laura, for sharing with us on this subject. We do have a few questions in the chat that I'll get to, but just as a reminder, if you would like to ask a question of our panelists, you can either type a question into the question and answer box within the Zoom at the bottom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and we'll call on you and unmute you so that you can actually ask your question live. But as you guys are typing in your questions or raising your hands, we do have a few that I can read now. So one question that we received is, can you provide the source of the environmental impact map that you displayed that shows environmental impact pollution in Delco? I'm unclear what that was showing exactly. We just had that link shared in the chat by Becca. Thank you. I know that the disclaimer or like the about on the Penn Enviro screen says the data contained within Penn Enviro screen comes from various state and federal government resources. I'm not sure if anyone knows any more about the sources of the data there.
I do not. I learned about that screen at the town hall meeting where several people talked about that tool. I liked that tool. I used to use the US EPA's Enviro screen for those sorts of maps, and I find that the Pennsylvania one much easier to use, actually. So, but I too went to find the source of the data and found sort of the ambiguous language that you found, because I was curious where the data came from as well.
Okay.
If I can add to that just a little bit, I believe it's the same data that DEP uses currently for environmental justice areas to determine if that area is environmental justice, and would, you know, they do have a segment now in DEP that has been growing stronger despite the national cutbacks of that, to look at these areas with more transparency and public input. Thanks.
Great. And obviously the assess study that you just described very much supports the data that we see on that map for Delaware County and the city of Chester.
Yes.
I'll read one other question and then we'll get to some of the raised hands. So Madeline Bauer asked, would new facilities be required to act on the findings of the cumulative impact report, or is it up to the DEP to approve or deny their application based on the findings?
I can take that question. I'd say that, you know, as part of the permit application process, DEP could require an applicant or of a facility to do something to act on the cumulative impact report. So they could require a facility institute a change in their application that would aim to reduce cumulative impacts. However, that's not required under the current language of the bill. But ultimately, it is still up to DEP to approve or deny any permit application. And as part of that process, they can consider the cumulative impact report that is submitted.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, we'll get to some of the raised hands and I'll just go, I think it's in order. So at the top, we have Chester City Health Commissioner, Dr. Kristen Motley.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, Justin.
Hi.
So I wanted to ask, so I was able to participate in that hearing that was held at Widener when the House committee was hosting the event there on House Bill 109. And since that hearing, I've made a few phone calls to some legislators and had some conversations about it in terms of how they were planning to vote on it. And I've heard from multiple legislators that it has no chance at getting moved. And so I'm just so it passed out of committee, and I was excited about that. But then I'm hearing that it is not going anywhere. And so I'm wondering, have any of you heard that? And is there anything that we can do to help get this bill to the governor's desk at this point? And then also, I wanted to ask what amendment? So, if you have heard some pushback against the bill, do you have any ideas in terms of what amendments can be made that may make it more palatable to those legislators that are not for it? I'm just feeling like this is unbelievable. So I'm not sure if anyone else is hearing the same thing. So I would love to hear your feedback.
So I can start, and I think Alice and Laura can add as well. Kristen, first I want to say thank you for your presentation at the hearing. You were I loved your presentation. You're the one who showed the map that told me that I learned about that the PA map. So thank you, and I thought you gave a wonderful testimony to that. Sadly, so my students and I visited Harrisburg and met with representatives the day after it passed through the committee. And so we were lobbying the committee. Unfortunately, we got there a day after it got through the committee. And so we unfortunately heard similar things as you heard. I think it's going to be brought to the House. Representative Vitale's office has told me that they are waiting for feedback from a potential amendment that Carol Kazim plans to make on the floor. I think that is I don't know what her amendment is, but I think it's related to her testimony at that hearing. She was very vocal about a few things she wanted in the amendment. They have sent that language to the DEP, and they're waiting on feedback from that before bringing it to the House floor. I did get the sense that they think it will get through the House, although we did speak to some people who were not sure how they were going to vote. And what we were hearing was labor versus environmental and health concerns, which drives me crazy. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about green technology. There are cleaner ways to do science and to do chemistry and to do manufacturing. And so we don't have to pit the labor question against the environmental and the health issues. They can coincide, which is part of the reason I try to talk to people about green chemistry and how it can be done in a different way. So that's what I know about it. I was also told there was no chance it was going to get through the Senate. And so I should focus on contacting my senators, which is what I plan to do. And part of the reason we wanted to make this presentation was to encourage people to reach out to their House representatives to make sure it gets through the House, and then reach out to our Senate representatives to make sure they understand that this has support in the communities. And so that's what I would encourage everybody to do. I know Alice and Laura have recently met with Representative Vitale as well, so I'll let them add whatever else they know.
I'd say we've also heard the same thing about the amendments, but we are cautiously optimistic about moving this through the House because, first of all, this bill is a reintroduction of a bill from last session. And last session, I don't believe it was even called up for a committee vote. So the fact that we were passed and through committee, I think is a huge step. And I think with everything happening at the federal level, and a lot of our environmental protections and I guess human rights in limbo currently, like it really falls upon the states to kind of take on some of the duties of protecting their residents, especially in the face of the build out of polluting facilities. And so I think that's one thing that we can be optimistic about and like leverage in our conversations is that, it's now or never. And I would totally echo what Dr. Basson just said about contacting your representatives and even more importantly, contacting your senators. The Senate is Republican controlled, but Republicans represent people in impacted communities. And so to the extent that you're able to tell your stories and share your personal experiences as well as just your reason for why this matters, I'd say that is invaluable.
Yeah, thank you, Alice, and thank you, Lloyd. Yeah, exactly what I was going to say as well. Greg Vitale did feel very confident to push this bill before the end of the session, June 30th, and they were hoping to really fast track it. So it's important to reach out to your representative now and the Senate as well. And, you know, it's always the big problem is dealing with the building trade industry because they are afraid that will affect jobs. But if you can't breathe, they can't breathe either. So, you know, that's why we really have to look at, you know, like what Lloyd was saying with green jobs as well. And I know during the hearing, they had stated a Republican was concerned about losing control at the local level, that municipalities would lose zoning controls and all that. And that is totally false. These would only be large infrastructure programs that would require a DEP permit, which then would go through this extra step. So it would not affect any control at the local level or municipality level. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Erica Berman mentioned that she may have just a little extra question or something to add on this point. So Erica, we can invite you on.
Hey, Justin, thank you. Yeah, I think some people have already just mentioned that the calls to action to contact your legislators. And it was helpful to hear others' feedback. I work with Chester Residents Concern for Quality Living, which is CIRCLE for short. And we're the environmental justice group that is, you know, fighting polluters in the riverfront. We're also doing call to actions to get people to contact members of House and Senate around House Bill 109. So we also were receiving feedback or making us, you know, wary of whether this was going to pass House. So it was helpful to hear others' feedback. So I guess I didn't really have a question more than a statement. Although Laura did mention, did you say June 30th was the timeline that Vitali gave you?
Yeah, for the end of
Okay.
the session. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, we have information on our website for House Bill 109. I'm sure other groups here do as well. But thank you for presenting on this. It's very important.
Thank you. And thank you for all Circle's help. And yeah, we'd love to work together on getting this through.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Erica. And I know that it was just shared in chat that you can go to www.palegis.us/find-my-legislator to find your legislator if you're looking for who your representative or state senator are, to contact them about this important issue. I think we still have a little bit more time, so I see Maurice Sampson has a hand raised in the chat.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Maurice. Welcome.
Yes. I'm the Eastern Pennsylvania Director for Clean Water Action here in Philadelphia. Our organization was responsible for passing this legislation, the first one in New Jersey. What I want everybody to understand is that it took 10 years before that bill was passed. 10 years. And that it was actually passed in response to George Floyd's death as part of that era. And we were responsible here in Pennsylvania for having the bill first introduced by Donna Bullock in the first session. And it did pass out of the committee, but the House leadership on the Democratic side would not call it up for a vote. And it really does come down to there is concern on the union side. And we have learned very clearly that when there is union opposition, it is very hard to move these bills. And we do need to come to some terms down the line here of understanding that, you know, not all construction is going to be acceptable. the Pin Enviro screen, and that map, which I really encourage everyone to look into. It identifies 1,965 environmental justice communities. And while it is true, if you live in a community of color in Pennsylvania, there are many, many, many more communities that are white communities that are impacted, that are environmental justice communities. That this bill actually affects everybody. It is radical in that it is a measure of health, where that has not been the typical way these bills have that environmental legislation has worked. That map overlays 30 different indices in order to come up with the measures that it has. It gives every single municipality a score. And if you score more than 80, then you're an environmental justice community. I'm not going to go any deeper than that, but we have to be patient. We may not pass this bill, in fact, I'm pretty sure we're not going to. It's going to take time, but it's very, very important that we get a vote so that we can figure out exactly where everyone stands. And stick around. We'll get it passed. It's going to take a while.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all Clean Water Act's, assist with getting this to the point it's gotten already. And yes, I agree, we're all in for the long haul, and not just in the present.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining and your comments. I know that there's still a couple other questions in the chat, but I think we're getting close to our time here. So I want to wrap us up. So if you know how, you can put some claps in the chat here in the Zoom for Dr. Lloyd Baston, Alice Liu, and Laura Snyder for being our presenters today. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who has joined to watch and participate in today's session. So following the close of this session, you will be asked to provide your feedback to our speakers in a brief Zoom survey, and we do appreciate your time in completing that form. The next session in this 4th annual sustainability conference is titled Nature of Noise: How Maplewood, New Jersey successfully banned gas-powered leaf blowers, and that will be presented this evening at 7 p.m. So if you did not sign up prior, please visit delcopa.gov/sustainability/conference to sign up and get a link. And fittingly enough, one of the questions we didn't get to was about leaf blowers. So I encourage you to sign up for that and maybe try your question there as well. Finally, we would like to invite you all to attend our closing keynote celebration on Saturday, June 14th at the Lazaretto in Tinicum Township. This event will include a breakfast and a keynote presentation from Glenn the Hurricane Schwartz, and will be followed by an EV Expo, networking with more than 30 local organizations, and museum tours in the historic Lazaretto Quarantine Station. Walk-ins are welcome. So thank you again for your participation in the 4th Annual Delaware County Sustainability Conference, and we'll see you soon.